We do want to thank Brian for being here today. He contacted me back, I believe, the 1st of December, and he had this amazing idea for a program, and we are so glad that he is here today. We're going to talk about protecting vulnerable adults from scams, and I am going to turn it over to Brian.
All right. Thanks, Holly. Well, my name's Brian Bowden. I've been in technology for about 20 years. I spent about the last 10 specifically in cybersecurity. I currently work for a company called Okta, who's the largest um, identity security solution in the world. And I'm really happy to be here to talk to you guys today. I have, people in my life that are um, personally affected by dementia, and it has been a challenge really to kind of think through some of these things, as we've all probably had somebody in our life that we either heard of or known that has been faced with a scam, and thinking through like how do we protect somebody that has a disease like dementia or ALS, right? So today we're going to do a couple things. We're going to talk about the anatomy of some of these attacks. So we'll talk about how some of these attacks work. So you as caregivers, is really important that you know how they work, to not only protect your loved ones but protect yourself too. These scammers get are able to victimize people that are across all walks of life. They certainly target the elderly, and they certainly like to get hold of somebody that has uh, issues with cognition and things of that nature, but they target everybody. And then after that, we'll also talk about some preventative measures. So, what preventative measures can you take, particularly with the people that you're caring for? And this is a challenging piece, and there's no perfect answer, but we're gonna get into some things I think will really help. So, first survey is we just want to understand like people's experience with scams, and this can be just a poll of how many of you have had somebody in your life that's been affected by one. You may be personally been affected yourself. If you know what type of scam it was, that's an interesting thing to note. And one thing I want to say here is it's very normal to feel, you know, emotions like guilt or shame if you have been scammed, but you should never feel that way. You are truly a victim if a scammer takes advantage of you. And I think that's something that's really important to know. We're going to give you some tools here that I hope are going to help in the future so that you won't be a victim, but you should never feel bad for being the victim of a scam.
So, if you would, you can type in the chat your experience with scams, anything that you are familiar with, anything that you have had experience with, just to give us an idea, to give Brian an idea. And again, like Brian was saying, this is not something there, a lot of people have shame surrounding this, and that's what we're here for. This is a really safe place. So whether it's something that you experienced, a family member experienced, if you would just type in the chat something briefly about a scam you may have experienced.
All right, we'll see if anybody types anything, but we'll keep moving through
Go
here
ahead.
as well. So first, let's talk about some of the common scams and how they work. So these are some of the top ones from last year. There's certainly more. There's a lot of variations of these, but we're going to talk through each of these just to give you a bit more understanding about how they work. So we'll start off with the tech support scam, and I'll actually spend more time on this one because this one is really common. Um, it's also really aligns with a lot of the preventative things that we're going to talk about as well. So we'll just spend a little bit more time talking about how this one works. What you'll see is a common theme with all of these is the attacker is using either email or SMS or calling a person directly to get them on the phone. That is their goal, is to get you on the phone so that they can do the next part of whatever scheme they're doing. So a lot of times these tech support scams will come in the form of like a text message and it'll say, we're from XYZ software company and we owe you a rebate um, for the software. So contact us and we'll give you that money back. So you get on the phone with them, and the first thing that they'll want to do at that point is get access to your computer. And they do that using legitimate software. So they'll have you download AnyDesk or TeamViewer. Both of those are legitimate pieces of software. They're not malware. Now you can set up your security software to block things like that, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But they are legitimate pieces of software. And then they'll use them to remote into your desktop, and they'll often have like a basically like a rebate form that they have the person fill out, and they'll use this to really collect a lot of data about the person as well, their name, their address, their phone number, that sort of thing. And then they'll say, okay, we need you to log into your bank account um, so that we can make sure that you get this rebate that you're gonna send, and that they'll have typed a number in that form of the rebate amount, basically. And then at this point, the attacker will generally take control of the desktop for a while to where the end user or the victim can't see it. And they'll do one of two things. They'll either manipulate the HTML of the page to make it look like that person's bank account now has a very large additional amount of money in it. Or sometimes they'll actually, in that short amount of time, they'll get into the person's savings account and transfer a large amount of money into checking. So let's say they said the rebate was supposed to be for $40. Well, they'll manipulate the screen basically or do that transfer, and now it'll show that they actually put in $4,000. So when they bring the screen back up to where the victim can see it again, they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, ma'am, you must have put the wrong number in this form, and now $4,000 has been transferred to your bank account." Um, and then they'll make the person feel really bad about it. Basically, like, I could lose my job. We got to get this reversed and all these things. And so now their next goal is to get the person to drive to the bank and actually withdraw that money. And they'll want to stay on the phone with them the entire time because they want to really try to make sure that nobody else figures out what's going on here and stops them. So they want to stay on the phone with them the whole time. They'll get them to the bank, and they need to be able to get this money in an untraceable way. So they were wanting to get the person to withdraw the money from the bank, and then they'll have a way of either mailing that money, or sometimes they'll want the victim to go buy gift cards and mail the gift cards. And a lot of times it's to a money mule that's like in the United States, and then that money mule then sends it, to the scammer in the end. Um, there are a lot of variations on that exact scam. So maybe it starts off as the bank's calling, or there's certain little differences in the script, so to speak. But this one is very, very common. It's very easy for them to blow this out to a lot of different people. Um, and that is why you see it a whole lot. Another one that is decently common is the government impersonation. So this is where someone will send a text message or call the victim and pretend to be a government agent, and there'll be some reason that you're in trouble. You know, you owe money for a warrant, you owe your social security number is linked to this crime, and that you need to pay some sort of reprimand immediately. Um, this takes the same form a lot of times, and they'll want the person to go to the bank and withdraw money, and again, like buy gift cards. Obviously, that should be a really big red flag once you've heard how these scams work. Like the government's never going to want gift cards for something that they need money for. Um, they could also want to do a wire transfer, but a lot of times it is kind of that withdraw money, buy gift cards, send the money in the mail sort of a route. So very kind of similar um, flow here. They're just using this kind of government impersonation piece is the big difference. Crypto scams. So this one is taking advantage really of the victim's kind of desire to make money. So they'll, a lot of times it starts off through a phishing scam or a phishing email. You receive the email, it can promises this idea that you can make a lot of money in cryptocurrency. And because a lot of people have heard that you can make a lot of money in crypto, they want to investigate, right? And so the scammer is desiring to get them to withdraw money and then invest it into this crypto investment. A lot of times they'll also want to do this through kind of a physical interaction just to keep things very untraceable. So they'll have them withdraw the money and they'll have them go to like a physical Bitcoin machine, that they've researched and they know where it is, and have them deposit that money now into a crypto wallet that's their wallet. And Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general are untraceable, right? So once that happens, it can't be retrieved or anything of that nature. They might also have them like actually create like a Coinbase account and transfer the money that way. That's typically not as much though, because like an ACH transfer, it takes time to clear and there's just additional steps. So a lot of times it goes about this route of having them physically going to these Bitcoin ATMs and depositing the money. Romance scams, and this one's probably my least research, but the idea here is, of course, that they're taking advantage of just the desire for belongings, kind of very similar to catfishing. They're starting a connection with a person online via some sort of social networking uh, application, Facebook or something of that nature. And they'll build this relationship over time. And then there's always some point where it's, oh, something's happened and I need money. I need money so I can come see you. I have this medical emergency that's popped up and I really need money. It always kind of takes that sort of form. And then the last one we'll talk about today from kind of the types of attacks that are out there is the grandparent scam. And so the idea here, and this one is really horrible because the attacker will find audio files of the person's loved one and they'll use them to make it sound like it's actually their granddaughter or their daughter or their son, and that they're calling and they have an emergency and they need help. Now, the only good news on this one is it is pretty targeted. So if you think back to like that help desk scam, bad guys can send emails and texts and phone calls like all day long to everybody in the world, and that's a pretty wide net as far as like getting a hit count. This one is taking some research and it's more targeted. Like I have to, do some research on this person, find out who their family members are, find audio files of their family members, and then target them very specifically. However, if you think back to some of these other scams, once a scammer kind of knows that they have a target, they're going to come at them in different ways. So let's say they did that help desk scam. And in that process, they saw how much money was in their bank account. They know that there's more to go after, basically. So they may come at somebody that they've scammed before with a more targeted scam like this. So I've included two videos here that would also be great to watch. So the first one, this guy actually has a YouTube channel where what does he call it? He basically kind of it's called Scammer Payback. I cannot think of the name of it for a minute, but most of his videos are him taking advantage of scammers, so it's kind of an entertainment thing. But in this particular video, he actually does walk through how these scams work and talks about them in pretty good depth. And then the second video is just kind of things that were widely seen in 2025. So we went through kind of a top five list. This is more extensive lists of things that have been seen in the environment, just so that you can be more knowledgeable about them. All right, so we had a second survey here just to ask what people's confidence is in migrating scams. And are there any kind of things from the first session that we want to
Yeah, we've got a lot of them in there, Brian. You might, while they're answering this one, you might, and you talked about several of these, but there's some interesting ones in there. I'd love for you to take a look at it. So while Brian's looking at that, if everybody would, and what he has on here, now that we've covered essential prevention and response measures, how confident do you feel in protecting yourself and vulnerable adults against scams? And that people are already saying some not confident, some yes confident, but he's going to take a look at some of these you've put in there. Um,
And so I see someone mentions the computer virus scheme. So the IT support scam often is it's like I'm Norton Antivirus and we owe you a rebate. That usually starts off that way.
Looks like several ordering products online, and then they're signed up for a subscription to something. Um, Ordering products through Facebook. Seen several where
All
the
right, so several
yeah.
people are feeling really confident in their ability to handle scams. That's great. So, and with this question, I would say this is more about your personal ability, like spot a scam and know what to do. And we'll get into how we can protect our loved ones next. All right, so let's talk about some preventative measures here. So when you're thinking of protecting somebody uh, on here's what you should do to not be scammed. It generally, what pops in our head is education. So what we just went through for this group, right? But if we have somebody that's not going to remember that education, what can we do to further protect them? So that is the idea around a lot of these actions, right? So we'll jump into that. So one of the first things I'll say is you do want to always make sure you have multi-factor authentication on particularly your financial accounts. So your stock accounts, your retirement accounts, your bank accounts. Most of them require at this point, thank God, but it is really important that you make sure that you have that turned on. Um, there are certainly authenticators that are better than others, like passkeys or a mobile push app are better authenticators, but just having it turned on in general is like goal number one. The second place that you absolutely want to make sure you have it turned on that a lot of people don't have it turned on for is your email accounts. And why this is important is because the pathway to resetting a lot of your passwords and other authenticators is generally through email. So you want to make sure that your email is protected, that an attacker cannot get into your email. That is not a place you want them to be at all. If for me, I'd have MFA on every single account I have. But if I'm thinking of like things you want to just like go and focus on and make sure that it is enabled, it's these type of accounts first. All right, computer permissions. So the idea here is most of us, when we're using our computers, we're using it with full admin permissions. So that gives us the, of course, the ability to install software and do everything that we want. And used to, if you did anything other than admin permissions, it was kind of a miserable experience. Like in the past, the Windows standard user, it couldn't do enough, and then it was very frustrating. They've really improved that. So the idea here is that you would go and create a new account. You'd make that your administrator account now. You would promote it to be an administrator. And then you would store the password to that in somewhere. And a password manager, I would is what I would recommend. Something like a LastPass. Okta has a free one that's called Okta Personal, just any kind of password manager. And then you would then log in with that account and you would change the account that you have been using or that your loved one is using to log into their computer to a standard user. So what this does is now when they log in, they'll be able to go in their browser, be able to launch their applications and all those sort of things, but they would not be able to install a third-party piece of software. So if someone's requesting that they go and install TeamViewer or one of these applications, they wouldn't be able to. So there's a way to do this with both Mac and Windows 11. I've linked some videos on just how you go and add new accounts and you change their permissions and those sort of things. It doesn't step through these exact uh, steps that I have, but it shows you where to go and where to do them. This next one, this one I think is huge. I think it really, at least with the family member that I've had affected, this has been very helpful. These settings that I have recommended here, I'll say are pretty restrictive. So you may not want to do this on your personal phone, and I'll explain why. But it would be a great idea to do these on your loved one's phone. So basically within iOS 26, and I would definitely recommend upgrading to iOS 26 if you're still in the older version. It's been out about 4 months, so you probably have it if you're an iOS user. They have the ability now to block phone calls from basically anybody that's not on your contact list. Now, it'll still go to your voicemail. It'll still show as like a missed call, but it won't actually ring your phone. And so if you choose on the right-hand side there that screenshot where it says screen unknown callers and you set it to silence, that will keep those calls from coming through. If they're in the contact list, they'll still ring. The other thing that you can do, and this one I would recommend for everybody, is to install your carrier's spam prevention application. So with AT&T, it's called Active Armor. With T-Mobile, it's called T-Life. Verizon calls it Verizon Call Filter. Sometimes you have to be kind of at a certain tier in their system to use these. I don't know for sure with all of them if that's true, but sometimes that is the case. But this does a pretty good job just knocking off spam calls in general, ones that would show up as spam risk. So that helps to cut off a lot of them, but it certainly won't cut off all of them. This more kind of restrictive setting that I'm showing here will cut off the inbound calls from any of these sources that aren't getting picked up by the spam filters. Someone's trying to call from India to scam them, it's just not going to come through. Same thing on the messenger side. So on the SMS side, you can do the same sort of thing where you're basically saying if it's an unknown sender, just send it to this kind of spam folder within messages. It will still kind of show an exclamation point, so it could be potentially confusing, but I would try that out for sure. And I do have a page in the appendix that goes through how to do this with Android. There's different kind of flavors of Android that have included a couple links on where you can do a very similar sort of configuration. So security software, I definitely recommend using some sort of solution here on your computers. The big piece these days is not really so much about the malware defense, like you absolutely want malware defense, but so many of these scams use malicious URLs. So it's a phishing email, it takes you somewhere that's a bad guy wanting you to call them, right? And so the better solutions do a good job of blocking those. I wish I, could do an exhaustive evaluation of who's really good, but unfortunately, I've not done that. I can tell you, um, Bitfender Premium is what I use. Seems pretty good. It does a good job of blocking malicious URLs. Some have phishing protection. The gotcha there is a lot of them don't necessarily work across kind of like all the web mail carriers. So, like Yahoo in particular, I've had a really hard time finding anything outside of the native capabilities of Yahoo to give you additional phishing email protection. The other thing that you can do is, of course, make sure it's blocking um, remote software from being installed as well. So there's kind of multiple layers of defense there. Another one I have here is just minimizing your bank account exposure. So one thing that I would do, every bank's a little different, but like go down to your local bank and ask them what they do to prevent scams. And you can give them some of these scenarios and ask them how they would react in them. They do have all banks have some level of protocol. Certainly, the larger banks have probably more protocol on detecting when something seems kind of fishy, asking more questions, those sorts of things. It would be a great idea to understand how they handle those. You may, in some cases with your bank, be able to, limit certain transactions amounts. It seems like it's not a great option with my particular bank, but I know some of them do. I would certainly recommend enrolling in automated notifications anytime something happens with your account. So large withdrawal happens, deposits, whatever, just make it to where you're getting a notification so you can see that something's happening in real time. And then last thing, if you're able to put together a structure in place that kind of limits what's in your checking and makes it harder to just, if your savings with the same bank and you can just move savings to checking in 10 seconds, that doesn't do any good. But if you're able to structure things in a way where you have kind of your larger savings account in another structure, or maybe even with another institution, and it takes some time to move it over, that might be kind of inconvenient in some real life situations, but it is a layer of protection to think about. Just a little bit of security through obscurity, so to speak. The thing with scammers is they're trying to do these things in real time. Um, most of the people that are actually performing scams are not the masterminds, right? Most of them, a good number of them are located in India. It's just a real problem over there as far as their ability to crack down on it. And trust me, most of the people in India hate those guys as much as we do. Um, but they'll be basically warehouses full of people that had the script and they're just playing out the script. So they're not geniuses, they're not masterminds. Um, but there is still an opportunity that in these interactions that they could be putting something like malware on your computer. So if someone does actually gain access to your computer, I'm always in favor of you want to be able to restore it back to a time before that. Um, the easiest way to do that on Windows is they do have this basically volume snapshot capability where you can just roll back to the time before. Mac has the same thing. You just want to make sure those things are enabled and turned on. Like a third-party full backup software is something that I would also recommend. Like Mac OS Time Machine can do this too, like an external drive and that sort of thing. Um, at the very least, if someone has been on your computer, I would, have Geek Squad or somebody take a look at it and provide a recommendation. Um, but a backup solution of some sort is going to be very helpful there. And then finally, we just covered a little bit of this, but what do you do if some sort of exploitation does occur? For one thing, make sure you change all your passwords that, particularly if they were involved in the scam at all, like if they had you log onto your bank account, you want to change all those passwords immediately. You also want to make sure that none of your like profile data was changed as well. So there wasn't an email added or a phone number added or any of those sort of things. There wasn't an additional authenticator that was added that you don't recognize. Just making sure that that stuff gets cleaned up. Of course, report the crime. There's not going to be a lot that can be done in most of these situations. All the scams that we discussed were really about like making it to where it couldn't be reversed, right? Removing money, sending it in the mail, unless that package gets intercepted by the authorities somehow, you're not going to be able to get it back. Same thing with like an international wire transfer. It's not something that can be reversed unless it's kind of caught in the middle of it. And then the last piece there is that more how do we deal with the computer that was used? Just kind of making sure that anything was cleaned up that was used as part of the exploitation. All right.
You got some pretty good questions, Brian. One person asked, would you please talk a little bit about password lockers or keepers?
Okay, I'm guessing that means password managers. Um, so yes, the idea there is it's just one safe place to like keep all your passwords where you have strong protection to get into it and it helps you manage them. So something like LastPass, that's kind of the most common one. It's pretty good as far as like kind of recognizing that you're entering a new password and saving it for you. Now, that said, and I don't know how many people, when they're living with somebody that has dementia, they're sharing the same computer or they have a separate computers. If you're sharing the same computer, you might not want to have something like LastPass on the same computer that they're using that makes it very easy for them to pull passwords and then log into something with it. You might want to just keep that on your phone. If you have two separate computers, you keep the password manager on your computer and not on the other one. You just want to make sure that if they are talking to, if for some reason they manage to get on the phone with a bad guy, that they're not able to easily go access username and password information. But yeah, something like a LastPass is really good as far as managing your passwords and being able to look them up and all that sort of thing.
And what about, because they're talking about prepaid phones like from Walmart or track phones, the settings on those.
Oh yeah, you're probably not going to have a lot of options on something that's not like an Android or an iOS. You're probably be pretty constrained on what you can do there.
Okay. And then they're asking, what about risk when using facial recognition for bank accounts? Can AI replicate your face?
Generally, no. So if your bank account is moved to what's called FIDO authentication, it uses basically biometrics combined with some piece of hardware on your computer. It's very, very secure. So if they've moved to logging in with that sort of security mechanism, that's great. It is very hard to fake that sort of thing. That those software solutions are actually pretty solid.
You can type in questions, and then with this many people on, you could probably go ahead and unmute because I know it's hard to type some of these scenarios in. So just please be aware of the time. We do still have 20 minutes, but if anybody would like to um, unmute, Brian, could you stop sharing so we could see there you go.
Polly, I have a question.
Sure.
I mean, I know you talked about what do you do if a scam happens or we fall victim to it, but is there additional resources that we can go to, or how do we overcome the guilt and embarrassment and all those things? And that's probably a question for both you, Brian, and Holly, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will see if there's something else we can send out with the deck on kind of here's the steps that you should follow beyond the suggestions already given. And I'll let Holly answer the other question.
As far as the embarrassment of it, this is one of those things where, you know what, just like with the stigma of dementia, and there is a stigma, that's why we talk about it now to get rid of that stigma. We're to the point, that's one of the reasons Brian reached out to do this. There's a stigma that's related to the scams that happen. We're embarrassed. People have been putting in the chat, I've known someone who's very, very intelligent, but they were still it could happen to any of us. We have it happen at our work. We have it happen. It can happen to anyone. It doesn't have anything to do with your intelligence. It doesn't have a good grief, especially when they're pulling at heartstrings or they're making you think that you've done something wrong or they're going to download pornography or they're going to do. This is one of those that we've just got to get past that stigma and be able to step up and talk, own that it happened, move forward, and what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again? There is another question for you, Brian. Is Breach Watch a good source that we can check to see what apps and tools may have been recently compromised? And is there a better source than Breach Watch?
Um, let's see. I'm trying to think of the name of something here.
And you can continue to put questions in the chat.
I have a question if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead.
So I had a friend who was in a romance and she also thought she was in business with many celebrities. Um, and she finally has come out of it, but I've been talking to her about this for over 2 years, and she would not, you know, accept what was happening, no matter how I challenged. But I'm glad she finally came out of it. But now I have people that I work with that are talking about things that are obviously romance scams. And these are people that don't have much and all that. How professionally, like I try to do like motivational interviewing, kind of challenging their thinking and all of that. How else can you work with people that are clients to try to help them come out of it when they think it's absolutely somebody's going to come, rescue them on a white horse and all that.
Mhm. Brian, do you have anything for that before I?
Not, I'll answer the breach watch question real quick.
Okay.
I wasn't super familiar with that, but I just looked at it and it looks like a legitimate source of information, probably a good one to use. I tend to use kind of like these annual reports that come out that probably aren't super interesting reading for everybody else, like the Verizon data breach report and things of that nature. Um, in relation to the last one, Holly, I think I'll let you take that one. It gets into more of the psychological pieces that I just don't deal with as much.
Yeah. Because think about what's happening when somebody has the romance scam going on. That is, they're tapping in. It's the same thing before they get rich quick. Boy, that's tapping into that amygdala. It's making us dump those endorphins. This feels so good. They're saying things I need to hear, just like they're going to fill my bank account with money. It's too good to be true. So I think that is where we rather than go in with somebody and go, you shouldn't, because none of us want to hear that, we're going to get on the defensive. Where we come along and we validate, let's validate what's going on, trying to talk them through the reality of if it's too good to be true, this probably, maybe sending them to a program like this. That's going to be the great thing now is we've got this program and we're going to be able to send a program like this over because it's embarrassing. Just like we talked about earlier, it's embarrassing. So to be able to say that, no, they're taking advantage of me. No, I'm only sending them the money so that when I was a school teacher, I had a woman who got very, very caught up in a romance and she just kept sending money and kept sending money and he just couldn't manage to get here. And she had a master's degree. It didn't have anything to do with intelligence. They were tapping into that amygdala and those feel good hormones were dumping. It was filling a void that she had. And that's what happens. It's kind of filling that void. I'm needing this. So you continue to validate the feelings. I think we try not to go in with the what in the world are you thinking type of thing, but maybe open up to could I come alongside you? Is this something that we could do together? I saw this program and it said, and you send them something like this program, if you have articles, if you have information where it's kind of like what we do whenever somebody's in denial about dementia, family members in denial, we send them the education. We can't stop another person from anything, but we can educate them. We can send them information. Another question, Brian, could you talk about what a notification from a credit report alert that your information was found on the dark web means?
Yeah, sure. So the dark web is it's basically just think of it as the internet that's completely anonymous. So it is used for some okay reasons, but also it is where criminals share a lot of data. So if they potentially maybe have captured your credit card somewhere, they can actually go sell that on the dark web. If they have found certain kind of like login credential information from you, they can go sell that on the dark web as well. So there are some solutions, and unfortunately, like none of them come top of mind for me that are supposed to help you like clean up that sort of information from the dark web, or at least um, give you insight to what it is, so that you can go change whatever is exposed. But I will see if I can find one for the follow-up email.
Let's see. Do you happen to possibly have a handout, go-to resources, articles for those who are experiencing the romance scams?
That's just me, sorry. So I am with a HUD program, Section 8. So it's all income based. So it's kind of interesting the dynamics that I oversee as a service coordinator here, kind of a social work role, where half the individuals, like they lost a spouse or they have kind of downsize on houses due to income loss or really restrictive income. And then I have individuals that literally were homeless and were housing. And so we are already kind of dealing with an interesting dynamic there. But I have like several people, one in particular that has fallen in love with this prince. And I literally showed her an AI and literally came up with the same guy. And she kind of is more intrigued and wants to catch him in the act and has this thing. And they're very lonely. So part of it is also getting them out socialization. But I guess the question I have is just what, how do you combat the let's debate this? Let me prove you type of situation. I know you kind of talked on that, but I have these very strong, beautifully strong individuals that really want to prove a point that this is a true thing because they don't have the family and they don't have um, the village around them. And so I'm trying to build that up, but it's any compat things there or any trainings that you think would be particularly for the 65 plus community. I would love to hear about it.
Brian, do you have anything on that?
No, that one is the how do you do like intervention in those situations is not a strong area for me that I've dug into a lot.
Sure.
I'm sure are some great resources, but yeah, I don't have anything specific.
One of the things that I think is important to do is to continue to kind of cast doubt. The fact that you were able to find the picture online, and if they're wanting to kind of get into this game with you of, well, I'll prove that they are, and you're exactly right. There's some socialization that needs to be going on there because they need something else to do to be able to do that. The other thing I was looking up that there online, there is advocacy against romance scammers. That there is a site on advocacy against romance scammers. And it even has on there a library of the most commonly stolen images whenever they will show, like you were saying, with the image of here's the prince, here's the beautiful woman. Um, we did that with that friend of mine because somebody was able to run their picture and go, he's on all kinds of things. Look, he's even in this advertisement for something where it's just a generic picture that they're using. So, another thing that I found on here was that there is a internet crime complaint center where you can go online. It's actually through the FBI. And whenever you type that in, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, there's a lot of resources there. And you can even get as specific as romance scams on the FBI website. And so that's where you might get some of your good resources that you're looking for.
Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
That's a good place to start. So thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. There are, and then there's things online about, number one is exactly what I was saying, is the validation, the care and concern. Because if we go in shaming, that person's going to shut down. They're not going to talk to us about it anymore because they're going to feel like we're getting on to them. So starting with validation, care and concern, asking questions that are gentle rather than what were you thinking, but maybe coming across more with the tell me more about. What if I were to come to you and tell you that story? What if I were, because sometimes when it's happening to them, they don't hear it the same way as if it were me telling them the story. And then casting doubt on the story. Other questions? And you can unmute if you'd like.
Hey, Holly, this is Cheryl Akers. I'm a nurse case manager here in the Texas in Richardson.
Yes.
There's a service out there. It's called Telecom, Telecalm, and it is a service that someone can get to help block scam calls, but also help prevent outgoing calls if someone has dementia. Tavis Shiver is the owner. He's here locally, but his
Okay.
business is across the country, mainly for landlines. I know he was doing they were beta testing, I believe, for cell phones because so many seniors are using cell phones.
Sure.
The era of landlines are fast going away, but what he does is it basically if I can say this correctly, I think he takes over your billing service. You have the number ported over to him, so it's like a VoIP thing. And
Hmm.
it's been very effective. And you can set limits on the calls, especially if somebody with dementia, as we know, will make multiple outgoing calls. And no, I didn't just talk to you. I've talked to you 5 days ago. No, you just called me, mother. How that goes. But it's a really great service, and it's not that expensive. I mean, basically, he takes over the phone billing, which is running what, 30, 40, $50 a month anyway. And I think
Okay.
there's an extra subcharge, but everybody needs to look at that because it is really very helpful. I've used it for several clients of my own.
Thank you. And I just found one I put in the chat. It's called fightcybercrime.org. They've actually got a PDF of a conversation to have with someone who's caught up in a romance scam. So it's fightcybercrime.org, and there's a PDF how to talk to, understand, and choose your words carefully when someone's caught in a romance scam. So there's information out there. I mean, that's where it's wonderful that Brian was able to come to us with just this is what we need to do is just get these conversations going. Other questions? We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. You can unmute. Nothing's off the table here. Safe place.
It's like Cheryl Akers maybe trying to say something.
Cheryl, you're muted.
Yep, yep. Hello, hello. Um, so I think a lot of people need to talk to their banking systems. Whether you've got a joint account with a family member or you're the spouse of the person with I mean, they just need to talk to the banks and see what kind of safeguards they can put on the accounts so that if there is some kind of trend with people starting to withdraw fairly large sums of money where they hadn't in the past. That needs to be the major red flag, as well as making sure those, the two-factor authentication on the bank accounts even. I
Yes.
mean, yeah. Okay, that's me.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay.
And we talk a lot about that in our support groups as well, as far as if you do have a loved one who is diagnosed with dementia, about making sure that you do go to the bank, letting them know that there are just so many things that you can put in place. Everything from, there may be a time when you just have to take them off of the account to limiting. That is something a lot of people do is where they'll limit where this card only can charge $50 a day, $20 a day, whatever it is, but there are things in place at the bank. Brian mentioned going to the bank and talking to them. It's a great idea.
I also feel I also feel that the since the population is getting older, we're going to have more scam problems in the future.
Absolutely. Our baby boomers now are all over. I think this year, baby boomers are now 62 and over. So, and it's a large part of our uh, population. So you're absolutely right. But thank goodness there's resources out there. We've just got to be able to look and find. And just as we've been talking, as Brian was talking, I was doing a lot of looking and it's out there. But again, we got to make sure that we are looking at the right place. Here's another one. What's going to be next on security after multi-factor?
What's going to be next?
Yeah, it
Uh,
says
well, I don't know. There's so many aspects of security. So if you think about like all the recommendations we went through, it's in layers, right? So you're doing things in layers. You're limiting kind of the privileges that can be executed on the computer that you're using or your loved one's using. You're putting software to protect what sites it can go to so that it's less likely to hit a phishing link or something malicious that gets sent in an email. You're putting multi-factor in place to protect your accounts as far as getting in and accessing your different accounts. So all those different things are different layers of security, and you're applying all of them so that you have a better overall defense.
Excellent. Well, great conversation today. Good questions. Remember that Jamie will be sending out a follow-up email. You'll have a link to this video. It will also be on our YouTube page before the end of the week. You'll have access to the slides. There will also be a couple of more questions in there for you. She'll give you information on your CEs. So, Brian, we thank you so much. This was so informative. I have been sending out emails and texts while we've been talking to friends going, you've got to listen to this as soon as it's up and on YouTube. So you had some great information. We really appreciate you.
All right, take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.